Thanks for joining me for another video. This one is a comparison between the Phaze 3 and 2 intense fires with different layouts. My Phaze 3 layout is 5 1/4 by 3 3/4 by 4 3/4. My first intense fire layout is 5 1/4 by 5 by 2 3/4, and my second one is 5 1/4 by 3 1/2 by 4 1/2. So the same pin to pap for all, but the Phaze 3 and second fire are pinned down while the first fire is pin up, and we'll see how different the PSA to pap and pin buffer measurements make them. The Intense Fire was the first stateside ball to feature R3S Hybrid, which is basically R2S enhanced. More traction, quicker response, etc. The Rad E core from the Fire was also in the original Intense, and the two Intense balls met an interesting reception. The Rad E core revs super quickly when it hits friction. It's most visible on my second Fire, but R3S is interesting in that the Pearl version is somehow smoother than the Hybrid version. It's a bit slower on friction, so the Intense always reminded me of a hybrid type reaction, or the type of reaction that I normally need to find a hybrid cover to fit. And the Fire has always reminded me of a Pearl, super clean, very responsive down lane, and it almost seems to accelerate on the back end. For most people though, both Intense releases seem to be either too much or too little, and with as quick revving as the core is and as strong and quick as the cover formula is, that resulted in some pretty layout sensitive balls in my opinion. I featured both fires in my latest Essentials collection videos. They both have very defined differences and much different purposes in my bags. Layouts are quite a bit more important and can create greater differences on asymmetric balls because of the additional imbalance you can create. My first fire is the one that I featured in my original review a year and a half ago. It's pin up, and let's get into the full layout. At 5 1/4, the pin to pat measurement stands the core up more, so it's rolling more top over bottom or end over end, which will get it easier length and make it more forward rolling off the end of the pattern or make it want to straighten out more. At 5 inches, the PSA to pat measurement is also pretty weak and more forward rolling. It turns the core horizontally to the point that there's very little imbalance there either, so I've mitigated the aggression of the core quite a bit. At 2 3/4, the pin buffer measurement still makes the layout pin up, which does lower the RG a bit and raise the differential because I'm taking weight more out of the side of the core, which in effect makes it not as wide and creates a greater difference between the width and the height of the core. So the result is that I've got a longer and more forward rolling biased layout, but still with some pop down lane, and that's obvious in the reaction. It's great for when I need to keep my angles closed but need some extra firmness down lane that I can't get out of a symmetric ball like, say, the Idle Pearl. You can see that when I start to get deeper, it doesn't really want to. It's pretty relegated to the zones right of third arrow unless I really help it. Moving on to fire number 2, we've got a fairly different story here obviously, and there's absolutely zero overlap any way you look at it. The pin to pap is the same at 5 1/4, so again, core is fairly straight up and down. The PSA to pap measurement is quite a bit stronger at 3 1/2. This turns the core horizontally at nearly a 45-degree angle and takes almost full advantage of the asymmetry, which makes it rev up very strongly down lane. The pin buffer is quite a bit weaker at 4 1/2. That moves it into pin down territory where the weight removed from drilling the fingers takes more out of the top of the core, which shortens it and raises the RG and decreases the differential. With such a strong PSA to pap measurement, I didn't need to add any more to it. With as quick and responsive as the cover is, like we've discussed, I didn't need something winding up and then going insane down lane. I wanted churning and revving without overkill on the back end aggression or a cutting finish. The end result is that you can see that this fire doesn't like playing right. I can force it to if I really want to, but that's covered by my first fire. At third arrow, where my first fire begins to get longer and softer, that's where my second one starts warming up and getting comfortable. It's quite a bit quicker revving. You can see how even here I kind of have to lay out of it with my hand because as it gets to the end of the pattern, it picks up and revs quite quickly. Now as I get deeper, you can see exactly what I'm talking about. The strong and quick revving of the core with a decisive but not overpowering move on the back end. It's a reaction that gets me back from the deeper zones on the lane while being effective at the same time. It's fun to watch a ball boom, but the name of the game is scoring, and too much boom isn't usually helpful. Now we visit the Phaze 3, and here we can see the difference the asymmetric versus symmetric core creates because they have the same cover. Nearly identical layouts, same pin to pap, and only a 1/4 inch different in pin buffer, which is negligible. PSA to pap doesn't come into play on a Phaze 3 at all because there's no horizontal asymmetry in the core. It's like turning a pop can one way or the other. The width of the can is still the same all the way around, so there's no asymmetry there to create additional imbalance. The result is that the core doesn't rev up as much on its own. It allows me to do more of the revving myself. It's not quite as powerful, so I can go ahead and get all of it at the bottom that I want, where with the second fire, I need a fair amount more oil to let me get away with that. At the same time, the second fire doesn't need quite as much out of me. It does more of the work on its own, but the flip side of that is that I don't have as much control over what it does, and it can be hard to adjust mechanics to just slow down your rev rate. If I want the Phaze 3 to slow down a little, I can back out of it and slow it down. Now with the second fire, I'm not sure I've ever given it the business at the bottom. It's plenty strong at about 75% from me. The result is two very similar zones of play, but the second fire is still an appreciable amount stronger than the P3, so the use for each will depend on the length and volume of the pattern, as well as the amount of lane surface friction, while the first fire shares nothing at all in common with either the second or the P3 from a reaction standpoint. Thanks for watching.